Hello, everyone, and welcome to this. Last year, I was joined by these two gentlemen to break down the year of 2020 in mixed martial arts, and we'll do it again. We're down a man. We had Shaq last year, who was with Fightful, now obviously doing big things at CBS Sports. He couldn't join us, but I still have two strong gentlemen with me, as always. We'll go first to my right here, Eric Marcotte of Post Wrestling, and down below from theScore, Nick Baldwin. Guys, I guess first of all, before we get into the categories, we'll start with you, Eric. Overall, how did you feel MMA was in the year of 2021?
I would say largely positive. We had a lot of great fights, a lot of great moments, and of course, there's tons of lowlights to balance it out. But overall, a fun year.
And Nick, for you, how did you feel about MMA in 2021?
Yeah, I would pretty much echo what Eric said. I feel like the one big negative was just it felt more so this year than any other year before that some of the fight nights weren't great. Some of the cards weren't the most interesting to watch, but that comes with the territory, I suppose. Overall, a good year. Hopefully 2022 can be even better.
Yes, hopefully it can be. Hopefully we can get more like fight night shows outside of the Apex. The Apex is great to an extent, but everything just feels the same each and every week, except those pay-per-views starting from April where they got outside of the Apex and were able to start touring again. But let's get into the categories here. And the first category is Male Fighter of the Year. We'll start with you, Eric. Who did you have as the male fighter of 2021?
So for me, at least, this was a fairly easy pick, although there were a couple choices. I went with Kamaru Usman, 3-0 this year against three very tough opponents in Gilbert Burns, Jorge Masvidal, and Colby Covington. He finishes two of them, and he ends the year on top of our pound-for-pound list. So Kamaru Usman, my 2021 male fighter of the year.
Nick, did you echo what Eric said?
Yeah, I got a good Kamaru here as well. I think you can kind of make a case for Charles Oliveira, especially if you're including the Tony Ferguson win. But since that did happen in 2020, technically can't really include that in this conversation. I just think Kamaru's 3 wins. You can't really get a better streak than that. And then when you count the fact that they're title fights, they're title defenses, it's tough to defend your title over and over. We've seen that, from past champions. Just what he did was what no one else did. Like, he proved to be not only the best welterweight by a wide margin, but he proved to be the best fighter pound for pound in the world this year. And for that, you got to give him the Fighter of the Year award.
Yeah, I'm going to make it a hat trick as well. Pretty much the same thing. And it's not only that he won and won emphatically, it's how he won. Like, he had to weather a storm in that Gilbert Burns fight and was able to then put it on Gilbert Burns, and like the first guy to finish Jorge Masvidal since 2008. And then a pretty competitive rematch against Colby Covington where he once again did tag Colby in the second round of that fight. And just, the whole statement for Kamaru this year has been kind of making a run towards George St. Pierre. And, in 2020, we probably thought, there's a long way to go with that. But I thought in 2021, he's kind of closing the gap on that. He's still not there, needs a couple more wins in impressive fashion. But how he's looked still hasn't really been taken down at all as well. Kamaru Usman, I think I'll make it a hat trick. Slam dunk, the male fighter of 2021. Let's go now, female fighter of the year. We'll start with Nick this time.
I'm going to go with Juliana Pena. And I know some people sort of aren't giving her this award because she only fought twice, or it feels like people are forgetting that the Sarah McMahon fight happened in 2021 because it happened back in January. People aren't even sort of thinking about that. That was a comeback in itself and a upset in itself. But obviously this all comes down to the win over Amanda Nunes. I mean, yes, I'm basing this award off one fight, one performance, but how can you not? Like, when you upset the Amanda Nunes, the greatest female fighter of all time, bar none, not controversial, consensus, everything like that. Like, it has to be Juliana Pena. Rose Namajunas, yes, she won back the title and defended it again in a rematch with Zhang Weili. She had a great year. I think Marina Rodriguez is a bit of a sneaky sort of, no one's giving her female fighter of the year, but I think she's in that conversation. Shevchenko obviously had 2 big wins, but it all goes back to Juliana Pena's win over Amanda Nunes. Obviously a remarkable result, and for that, I don't see any other option but to give Juliana Pena this award for Female Fighter of the Year.
I like the pick. I mean, it's kind of, as you said, you're basing it off one performance, but there is merit to your reasoning there, Nick. So, Eric, who did you have as the female fighter of the year?
Well, I'm about to say a lot of the same thing. I mean, there is a lot
Oh,
of tough choices. I thought this was a lot closer than the male fighter of the year for me. I considered Marina Rodriguez, Valentina Shevchenko, Chris Cyborg, Rose Namajunas. But at the end of the day, I think 2021 will be remembered as the year of Juliana Pena. And to be perfectly honest, that Sarah McMahon fight, even if it doesn't happen this year, I don't think it changes my pick at all. I'm not weighing that into this. It's all about the Amanda Nunes win. So 2021, Juliana Pena, my female fighter of the year.
wow. I'm kind of surprised that both of you went with Pena for female fighter of the year. I went, I guess off the board. I went with Rose because I thought, honestly, her win against Wei Li Zhang back in April at UFC 261 was very impressive. Obviously, we weren't expecting that fight to end with like a head kick in the first round, but when she had to back it up in the rematch back in November at UFC 268, I thought she showed some growth. She's shown a lot of growth mentally and being the ability to probably run that strawweight division for quite a while, at least probably for all of 2022. So that's why I went with her. But yeah, I think Shevchenko is a good nominee. And Pena now definitely makes a case for that one win, but I went with Rose. But kind of interesting that the both of you went with Pena after the one win there for her back to close out the year in December. Now we move on to probably one of my favorite categories, Fight of the Year. Start with you, Eric.
There were so many contenders to go through for this award this year that I feel bad that I can't give an award to, say, Dominic Reyes versus Yuri Prochazka, which is one of my favorite fights ever, or Edson Barboza and Shane Burgos. Just so many fantastic fights throughout the year, but it came down to UFC 268, Justin Gaethje and Michael Chandler. When this fight got put together, everyone was expecting a terrific fight. Everyone was expecting an explosive fight, but I don't think many people were expecting 15 minutes of it. No, these guys went the distance, throwing bombs at each other from the first minute to the last, and a well-deserved Fight of the Year award for those two.
Nick, what was your Fight of the Year?
I'm going a little off the board and saying Max Holloway versus Yaya Rodriguez. My initial reaction after that fight, which, of course, if you remember, was 1 week after the epic brawl between Gaethje and Chandler, which is number 2 on my list for what it's worth. My reaction after Holloway Rodriguez was this was the fight of the year. At the time, yeah, it had just happened. It was reactionary, but I thought about it a bit more. I watched the fight back, and although I don't think this is the popular pick, I don't see a better fight than that. I think you can obviously make a strong case for Gaethje Chandler. Like, this is one of those awards that there are about 3 or 4 that could all be number 1, and you can't really argue it too much. And then you can make the case, obviously, for Gaethje Chandler. Volkanovski Ortega is up there. Peter Yan's, Corey Sandhagen's one that nobody's really talking about. But I just enjoyed Holloway Rodriguez a tad more. I think maybe the fact that Yair was such a big underdog, no one was really giving him a shot, and he did look good. Max clearly won, but I don't think it was one-way traffic whatsoever. Yair did tag him, maybe not rock him, but he did get in his own fair share of shots. I just think that was a great fight, and I'm going to give it to Holloway and Rodriguez.
I like the pick, honestly, because I think a lot of people aren't going to take that, Nick, especially as you said, it's coming the week after Gaethje Chandler. But as you said, Yair is just such a dangerous guy and had moments in that fight where he could have maybe countered against Holloway. But I like the pick going off the board. But I'm going to go with what Eric said. Gaethje and Chandler. It was a fight that really, when Michael Chandler signed with the UFC, that was the only fight it really wanted to see Michael Chandler have against Justin Gaethje. There was a lot of hype going into the fight, and then not only to deliver, but exceed expectations and do it for 3 rounds of pretty much just video game action where both guys tagged each other, hurt each other. Either one could have won at certain moments in the fight. Even the one takedown we had was one of the most wildest exchanges of the year. I think we have to go with Gaethje Chandler. It's one of the best fights to happen in the UFC, and it was, to me, the clear winner for Fight of the Year of 2021. Now, Round of the Year. We'll start with you, Nick.
Oh, this is another tough one, and I feel like the one I'm going to go with isn't the best round. I don't know. I just feel like I got to give it to Dustin Poirier and Charles Oliveira round 1. That was an insane back and forth round. Poirier rocks Oliveira. Oliveira gets in his shots of his own. it maybe didn't have the momentum shifts of like a Merab Dvalishvili, Marlon Rice, which I think is a great pick as well. I think maybe the front runner here would be Reyes and Prochaska. I have a feeling Eric's going to go with that one, considering what he said earlier. But I'm going to go Poirier Oliveira round 1. I don't feel great about this pick, but I just remember watching that a few weeks ago and thinking, this was amazing. This was like nonstop action, 5 minutes. My eyes are glued to the TV. I don't know if I could say that about any other round, if I'm being honest, that I was paying attention and locked in for all 5 minutes.
All right, Eric, are you going to live up to what Nick says and go with Prochaska Reyes as a
Once again, that fight finishes second on my list because my round of the year belonged to round 3 of Alexander Volkanovski and Brian Ortega for the UFC Featherweight Championship. I mean, a fight that was competitive for 5 rounds, but largely Alexander Volkanovski in control, doing the damage. Then in round 3, Brian Ortega gets him on the ground, traps him in a guillotine. It looks like it's it. Volkanovski escapes only to find himself in Ortega's signature triangle choke. Once again, escapes the hold and ends the round. Pretty much, this might be controversial. I don't know. Pretty much knocking Brian Ortega out at the end of the round. They 100% could have stopped the fight there. Just a terrific round, and plus the stakes of the title being at the line. That's what pushed it over the edge for me.
Ooh, that's definitely up there for a round of the year candidate. I mean, you could go, I think, any round between, Shane Burgos had against, I'm forgetting the name now. I can't believe that. Barboza. And Billy Quarantillo as well. But honestly, I went with round 1 of Chandler Gaethje. I just thought it was literally like a video game. It was 2 guys just plugged in, button mashing, laying all their best shots in, the home run bombs. It was the best round Chandler had in the fight as well, where, even Gaethje's corner had to be like, you gotta stop throwing like that. But it was just entertaining for the crowd. To me, it was the winner there. Chandler could have won another round 2. It was you could have gone round 2, Chandler Oliveira, where he ended up losing off the momentum he had the first round. Going into the second round was what Charles Oliveira did, but I went there. But guys, excellent choices going on there. Now, submission of the year. Thought this was a little bit more of a tricky category, but we'll go with Eric to start this time.
So I ultimately went with Andre Muniz submitting Jacare Souza in the first round of their match at UFC 262. I mean, so Muniz is an accomplished grappler in himself. It's not surprising to see him win a fight by submission, but against Jacare Souza, a man who's never been submitted in MMA, never even really been handled on the ground before. And it was a brutal submission at that, snapping Jacare's arm. To Jacare's credit, a complete badass, didn't even flinch, but a terrific submission, an upset at that, and I gave that my submission of the year.
Nick, what was your submission of 2021?
I'm going the same one. Muniz, Jacare. When you have a guy as high level on the ground as Jacare, who A, gets submitted for the first time, B, suffers a broken arm. I mean, whether it looked pretty or not, how can you not pick that? I do agree, Jason, that this is probably a tougher category. I always feel like the submissions are tougher ones to really sort of pick the number 1 of the year. But to me, this does stand out a little bit among the rest. I'm going to give it to Andre Muniz's breakthrough performance earlier this year, or earlier last year, I suppose.
Yeah, well, literally a breakthrough submission, as he did, as you said, Nick, break the arm of Jacare Souza, which I think that's why I'm going to make it a hat trick here as well. I just think, as you guys said, the guy that Muniz submitted is Jacare Souza, one of the best grapplers to ever transition to mixed martial arts. And as Eric said, really never been tested on the ground. And then to get not only put in a compromising position, but submitted and have a limb broken. I don't think anyone ever expected that to happen in that fight. You could have maybe seen Jacare losing, but not in that fashion. But I think for Muniz, that was the biggest win he's ever had, and it's catapulted him. He got a big win to close out 2021, and I think he's going to be a real guy to look forward to what he can do going into 2022. This is another fun category, knockout of the year. And there were plenty of knockouts this year that were really sensational. But Nick, what was your knockout of 2021?
Unlike 2020 with Joaquin Buckley's spinning, whatever that was, there wasn't like a number 1 clear front runner for knockout of the year this year. But I'm going to give it to Sergio Pettis's brutal spinning back fist against Kyoji Horiguchi just a couple weeks ago, beginning of December, Bellator title fight in the bantamweight division. that was just incredible when you consider the fact that Pettis was losing literally every minute of that fight up until late in the fourth round when he landed that strike. When you consider the fact that it was a title fight, that has to be it. I think Corey Sandhagen's flying knee of Frankie Edgar is a close number 2 in my eyes. That was sort of my front runner all year. I thought I was going to give it to that, and then Pettis did what he did. I think Usman over Masvidal is probably a pretty clear third, but I'm going to go to Pettis' win over Horiguchi. Just, I think the surprise factor definitely bumps it to that number 1 spot. Plus, it was a crazy knockout too. Like that was incredible. So Pettis over Horiguchi, knockout of the year.
Eric, what's your KO of 2021?
So I suppose my knockout of the year comes down largely to the context. And don't get me wrong, it's a brutal knockout as it is, but context makes these moments. And Kamaru Usman's knockout of Jorge Masvidal is all about the context. You have Kamaru Usman, not someone known for brutally knocking out his opponents, most of his wins by decision. And Jorge Masvidal, on the other hand, a guy with an iron chin, has barely been finished by strikes, I think twice throughout his entire lengthy career now. Going into the fight, that's kind of what it was built around. Jorge Masvidal coming out and saying, oh man, this guy doesn't hit hard at all. And in fact, seconds before the finish, Usman cracks him with the right hand and Masvidal just kind of laughs it off, saying, oh, is that the best you got? Apparently it was not, because Usman steps forward with a much harder right hand that practically just goes straight through him, knocking Jorge Masvidal out cold. Brutal knockout, and it's my knockout of the year.
I like the disparity in your choices. Like Eric's is on a moment and who it was against, and Nick's is not only it's a title fight, but it was an important knockout for Pettis because it really differentiated him from his brother. It was his breakthrough moment, and it was how he won a fight where he was clearly going to lose on the scorecards if it hadn't gone on for the other 2 rounds. Mine's a little off the board in terms of that. I went for the spectacular knockout, and that was Emily Ducote over Danielle Taylor at Invicta FC 44, where she hit her with a clean. This was also a title fight for the vacant strawweight title in Invicta. Ducote landed one of the most clean right hands to Taylor, and Taylor just froze like you would see in Mortal Kombat or any other video game, and then cracked her with a head kick square in the face. I think that has to be one of it's the shining moment for Invicta, which really took a step back in 2021. But it was a crazy knockout and one of the best. I mean, I'm kind of surprised Eric didn't pick Prohaska with his spinning back elbow, considering how much he loved that
number 2 on my
year.
list for a third time.
It just makes number 2 Prohaska, number 2 in your heart this year, Eric. But you know what? Good choices. But I had to go with Emily Ducote. That was an unbelievable knockout. Today's her birthday, so what a better birthday present than her giving her an award for knockout of the year in 2021. Now let's go with breakthrough fighter of the year. And I don't think there were that many choices, but some guys did really exceed what they had done the previous year in mixed martial arts. And I believe I'll start with Eric this time.
I had a lot of difficulty with this one because I would say there was a lot of people who started to move their way up into the rankings throughout the year. And to narrow it down, just to make things easier for myself, I went with the criteria of, okay, out of all these fighters that I've picked, who do I think is most likely to challenge or even win a title in the future? And in the end, out of all the fighters I considered, I thought that guy was Tom Aspinall. I mean, part of that is, of course, being at heavyweight, a division that's not exactly full of young up-and-comers, but he's been extremely impressive throughout his UFC run. And in 2021, he started to fight that next level of competition, guys like Andrei Arlovski and Sergey Spivak. He finished them both, and I think he's in a really good place going into this next year.
Nick, who's your breakthrough fighter of 2021?
I thought I was going to go Cyril Gane just because he went from, yes, he did knock out Junior Dos Santos at the end of 2020, so that was kind of maybe his breakthrough performance, but 3 wins this year against Rosenstrike, Volkov, which was a great performance, and the Derek Lewis, which was obviously a bit of a masterclass, setting up a title fight coming up in less than a month, or later this month. Keep forgetting it's a new year. I was almost going to go Cyril Gane, but I'm going to switch right here and go Giga Chikadze because I think Cyril Gane had already sort of established himself in the slightly, at the time, weak heavyweight division. Now it's actually pretty good. But Giga Chikadze, if you look at his resume before 2021, his biggest win was what? Omar Morales, Brandon Davis. Like there was no signature win. There was no breakthrough performance. But wins this year against Cub Swanson and Edson Barboza have skyrocketed him into the top 10, set up a big fight coming up in 2 weeks with Calvin Kattar. This is a guy that I think will be a UFC champion at some point. And I think that could have happened sooner rather than later. I think whether or not he wins it, I'm not sure. But I think he could get that shot maybe even in 2022, depending on how things line up, how active Volkanovski wants to be, how that Max fight, assuming it does happen, plays out. So I just think Giga is in a great spot heading into 2022. And this is a guy who's on everybody's radar now. And I don't know if that was the case at the beginning of 2021. So I'm going to give it to Ninja Giga Chikadze.
I like the pick, Nick. Definitely something a little off the board, but has a lot of merit. But I'm going to go with the guy that you were going to pick. Yeah, I'm going to go with Cyril Gane because while Gane, yeah, he did have that win against Junior Dos Santos at the end of 2020. I thought really they put him, right in the fire of the heavyweight division in 2021. As you said, the Rosenstruck fight, the Volkanovski fight was really just one of the best performances we've seen from him. And then just what he did to Derek Lewis, really just putting all the pressure on, beating him down, really making Lewis only have to really rely on the big right hand. And then, just putting him away. And now he's trying to fight to unify the titles. I think really it was a breakthrough year for Gane, and he's leading the way for this new wave of French MMA where, that could be a breakthrough country in MMA where they finally legalized MMA and has all these talents coming through. But I went with Gane. Maybe it's not the most, sexy pick, but I think it's the most logical one. And we'll see what he can do in a few weeks, January 22nd at UFC 270 to unify the titles in the heavyweight division with his opportunity against Francis Ngannou. Now, comeback of the year. We'll go with Nick. Now, this can be either a fight or someone's career. That's the way I perceived it, but we'll start with you, Nick.
I didn't give a ton of thought to this category just because I thought it was Pettis Horiguchi all day. Like, again, if we're talking about the context, title fight, not only was Pettis losing the rounds, like not only was he down 3-0, but he was down like, what would it be, 15-0 in minutes. Like if we're breaking it down that fine, like he was not winning any seconds or minutes of that fight whatsoever. Kyoji was handling him all day. He was at that point cruising to a victory. And he was 6 or 7 minutes away from that victory and that Bellator bantamweight title. And then just out of nowhere, Sergio Pettis lands that spinning back fist. Yeah, like that. I really do feel that was maybe the craziest, most shocking moment, I guess, except for Pena submitting Nunes. But in terms of just pure shock value, not necessarily like an upset, but just biggest moment, craziest moment, that has to be right up there for all of 2021 in the sport. Yeah, that was my comeback.
Eric, what was your comeback of 2021?
Easy choice for me as well. Sergio Pettis versus Kyoji Horiguchi. What's already been said, right? Every single minute of this fight, dominant for Horiguchi. And let's add to that, Sergio Pettis, not someone who's known for finishing fights at all.
Oh, yeah.
And to just knock Horiguchi out cold like that, a career-defining moment, and easy choice for me for comeback of the year.
Well, you guys went with a performance in a fight. I went with someone's career, which kind of really bounced back in 2021. And I went with Jose Aldo's career because Jose Aldo's career in 2021 really took a swing in the positive direction. Now, he had a big win to close out 2020, the Chito Vera win, but really we thought, maybe that's a one-time performance. But Aldo looked so good in both the Pedro Munez and especially the Rob Font fight at the beginning of December, where this guy seriously can contend for a title at bantamweight. And I don't think anyone thought that would be the case when Aldo decided to drop from featherweight to bantamweight. He's now, as I said, a big player. Maybe we get that fight with Dominic Cruz, to really prove WEC never dies and has those two, kings of featherweight and bantamweight meet. But really, like, Aldo looks better now than he did in some of his featherweight performances in the UFC. So I went with Jose Aldo's career really taking a surge in the upward and, proving why Aldo's, a future Hall of Famer of mixed martial arts when his time actually comes to an end. Let's look at the next category here, and we'll go with story of the year. Now, there were some big stories, but kind of interesting to see what everyone's going to pick. I'm going to go with Eric to start with.
Okay, so there's kind of two facets to this story, but it's all one, so I'm not cheating, guys, okay? I went with the UFC's record-setting profits in 2021, and on the other side of that same coin, the continued debates and issues that revolve around fighter pay in the sport, specifically in the UFC. I mean, I feel like that's dominated the headlines every single week of this entire year, and I don't see that stopping this year either, especially with one of your most marketable fighters, Francis Ngannou, John Jones, Stipe Miocic. They're all having these same issues with the company, and they're being very vocal about it, very public about it. So that's what I went with. And I wouldn't want to, from the business perspective, I think you have to acknowledge the UFC's profits as well. So that's my pick.
Nick, what was your story of the year, Nick?
Maybe a little off the board, but my story of the year is just the overall how the UFC navigated Khabib leaving and sort of rebooting their lightweight division, for lack of a better word, moving on without Khabib. It all started at the beginning of the year with Dana White, confident that Khabib would come back. Obviously, there was that big moment on the McGregor-Poirier 2 pay-per-view where we all thought there was going to be a huge announcement, and Khabib was just like, yeah, I might come back, but probably not. And that was anticlimactic. And then it was Dana White finally admitting that Khabib was retired. He the loss of his father was too much. He didn't want to move forward without him. And that was it for Khabib. He would do his own thing. And then, of course, there was the kind of bizarre, but the fight that did make sense with Poirier wanting to fight McGregor again, Chandler versus Oliveira. There was the whole idea that, hey, is Charles Oliveira the best in the world, or is that Dustin Poirier? A lot of people thought it was Poirier. And then that all culminated in the big fight we had a few weeks ago between Oliveira and Poirier. And I just think to sort of cap it all off, we saw, a dominant champion in Khabib sort of in the end pass the torch. Like we kind of have seen Charles Oliveira over the past 8 or 9 months become that next guy at 155. All year, even when he had won the title against Chandler already, we weren't really sure if he was the number one guy. There was a lot of debate, but that debate is over. Unless Justin Gaethje or Islam Makhachev can beat him, which they could, but as of right now, Charles Oliveira is the consensus number one guy at 155. And so I just think there were so many different facets to the story, so many different headlines. To me, it's just the overall how the UFC, good and bad, dealt with Khabib leaving at such a, at the peak of his career, and then finishing the year with a guy that is the best at 155 now, and he's sort of the new face of this division.
Yes, it was really the true storyline arc in MMA for 2021 was how 2020 ends with Khabib and then all that. And so, yeah, that's a solid pick, but I'm going to go with kind of the tail end of Eric's and fighter pay. Fighter pay was, to me, the biggest discussion all around. We've always known fighter pay was an issue, but no more than this year in past year in 2021 did this seem like a discussion every week. Like we had, now Francis Ngannou, we've had John Jones, have an issue with them. There was that fighter that had to get Jake Paul to pay for her training camp. Every Triller broadcast was pretty much talking about UFC and fighter pay. And fighter pay it seemed like I said, a discussion we were having every week. And what's the UFC doing to improve that or anything in that nature? So I just feel like, and especially how we, started 2022 yesterday with Jake Paul and his comments about fighter pay and why don't you pay your fighters more than your average fighters more than $12,000 a year, which is, pretty much like a yearly janitor salary or anything like that. So I think it's going to get even bigger going into 2022, unless the UFC actually acts and makes some changes. I don't think they will, but it's still going to be out there. So that's why I think it was the story of the year. And I think it's the best that's the story of the year, because this is an issue that needs to be brought out until actual change is made in the UFC and especially mixed martial arts. Moving on, upset of the year. And I think we're all going to have the same one here, but I'll start with Nick.
Yeah, I mean, I Nunes, Pena, I don't need to say anymore.
Yeah. Eric?
Nunes, Pena.
Yeah, Nunes, Pena. I mean, it's one of the biggest upsets in the history of the sport. I put it, just behind the likes there of Matt Serra, GSP, UFC 69. So we go then from that to UFC 269, where Juliana Pena, kind of steamrolled Amanda Nunes and fought the Nunes' fight in that fight to win the women's bantamweight championship. And I guess all eyes to see what Pena can do going forward. Feud of the year.
Before we move on, because that one was just so obvious, why don't we shine a light on some other ones that deserve some praise?
Sure.
Okay, I'll throw out Anthony Hernandez submitting Rodolfo Vieira. I mean, the odds of that happening were plus 3,000, just ridiculous. And on top of that, Adriana Moraes knocking out Demetrius Johnson. So big upsets all throughout the world. It wasn't even close though, was it?
No. Yeah. I mean, to me, and real quick, like that's the biggest to me in UFC history. It tops Sarah GSP ever so slightly, tops Home Rousey ever so slightly. There are a few reasons for that, just in terms of Nunes being the GOAT or the female GOAT at the time. GSP wasn't really considered that. But yeah, I mean, like not only does it not get bigger in 2021, but it doesn't get bigger to me in all time.
Yeah, I still got GSP getting beaten by Sarah as mine, still the biggest of all time. But Pena and over Nunes is definitely, a 1B to the 1A. That would be Matt Sarah over GSP back at UFC 269. Now, as we move on to Feud of the Year, there weren't a lot of big heated feuds like we'd seen in the past, but there were some. And I'll start with Nick. What was your Feud of the Year?
I kind of wish you were starting with Eric, but that's okay. Dana White, Jake Paul, Feud of the Year. How can you not go that one? As you said, like what other feuds were there? I don't know. But Dana White, Jake Paul, like it's continuing into 2022. I think it's even going to heat up more as we progress through 2022. But even in 2021, there's enough back and forth, Jake Paul, whether he's going to ever do business with the UFC, time will tell. Dana White seems to think that won't happen. He's not interested, but Dana White likes money, and Jake Paul seems to get quite a bit of it when he fights, unless the recent pay-per-view numbers are to be trusted, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, it was just such an unexpected rivalry, feud, whatever you want to call it. I suppose you could argue this isn't the biggest because it's not going to culminate in a fight or anything like that, and this is fighting we're talking about. But hey, in a year that there wasn't, at least that I can think of, too many great feuds, I'm going to give it to Dana White and Jake Paul. Why not?
Well, before I go to Eric, it's a shame that Jake Paul boxed because I think our breakthrough fighter for 2021 would be Jake Paul, but it was boxing, not mixed martial arts.
That's true.
So I think Jake Paul would have ran away with that if he stepped inside a cage instead of a boxing ring. But yeah, I think that's a solid choice. Eric, are you going to follow suit with Nick here, or did you have one that kind of, I guess, out of the box from that?
It's out of the box, but it isn't far out of the box. I went with Dustin Poirier against Conor McGregor. I'm not going to lie. I thought a lot of it was kind of gross, especially in their third fight. But nonetheless, it generated more money than anything else throughout this year, especially if you combine both the pay-per-views. So I went with that as my rivalry of the year.
Yeah, I'm going to go with what Nick said, but it's kind of going to be like Dana White versus Triller / Jake Paul, because it really started with Triller and them kind of egging on Dana White, and every broadcast that they had was something about the UFC and Dana White, and Dana would get asked about, I'm like, I don't care. But until Jake Paul started, running his mouth and showing up at UFC 261, and then with his continuous comments about fighter pay and whatever, like I'll fight your fighters and whatever. Yeah. And as you said, Nick, it was January 1st yesterday. It seems like that this feud's only going to get big. It's January 2nd. Jake Paul's already responded to Dana White. We're going to be in for a long year of dumb videos, but they're going to get the clicks and the views because of who the two people involved are in Jake Paul and Dana White.
You mentioned Triller. There was also like the whole Oscar De La Hoya GSP thing that sort of Dana apparently shut down too. So just throw that into the many different Dana White versus blank.
Yeah, Dana White pretty much won, I think, this award the past 2 years. It was pretty much Dana White versus COVID, and now Dana White versus an actual person this year. So Dana White, really, if you want a feud of the year, just getting some heat with Dana White. As we wind this down, not really an award, but kind of a prediction going into the new year, which is now already in its second day. Guys, what's your biggest hot take or biggest prediction overall going into the new year? And we'll start with Eric this time.
All right, this was a difficult one for me, but I came up with something that I believe in my heart. And at the end of 2022, we're gonna have to go back and just acknowledge my genius that this all came together. Okay, so firstly, Francis Ngannou loses his heavyweight title to Cyril Gane.
Mm-hmm.
During the summer, International Fight Week, Cyril Gane defends against John Jones and beats him. And then in November or December, Cyril Gane will fight Stipe Miocic and defeat him too, defeating Ngannou, Jones, and Miocic in the same year, and he will be a unanimous Fighter of the Year vote at the end of 2022. That is my pick.
I like the roadmap. I like the booking you have out for this, Eric. So definitely
everything's going to come together.
Yeah, exactly. Nick, what's your hot take or biggest takeaway going into the new year now?
This is definitely a hot take, and it's kind of along the same lines, but quite different. I guess to start, I would say that to me, the biggest story heading into 2022 is Francis Ngannou's conflict with the UFC. Obviously, he doesn't have a deal in place going into his unification bout in a couple of weeks against Cyril Gane, who Eric believes will be the consensus fighter of 2022. We'll see if that happens. But Ngannou is in a really bizarre and unique scenario where this is the baddest man on the planet. This is the UFC heavyweight champion, reigning and defending champion, and he is not on good terms with the UFC or Dana White. There is a deal, or there is no deal in place in the sense that if he loses to Cyril Gane and loses the title, he would likely become a free agent after UFC's exclusive matching period, all that, however that works. And if he wins, he would still be under contract because of the Champions Clause. But there's a real chance that he does lose his fight. And so I guess to precursor to my bold prediction, I just feel like that's the biggest story as we kick off 2022. This is a bizarre spot for one of the best fighters in the world right now. We don't see that very often. My bold prediction, my hot take, so to speak, is that Francis Ngannou loses to Cyril Gane. So I will agree with Eric, but this is where it gets hot. I think he leaves the UFC. I think January 22nd will be the final UFC bout of Francis Ngannou's career. Whether or not he comes back down the road, that is maybe. We'll see. But end of 2022, Francis Ngannou is not under contract with the UFC. I have no idea where he goes from there because Francis Ngannou in Bellator, in PFL, that does not make any sense. And frankly, Francis Ngannou boxing Tyson Fury does not make any sense either. So I don't know what the hell is going to happen to the Predator. But I just think with him being under contract with CAA management, Endeavor obviously is a big rival of theirs. Marcotte Martin, Francis Ngannou's manager, and Dana White have not gotten along. They've had back and forth on social media. And Dana White said he wasn't referring to this particular manager when he was trashing him, but I don't know who he was referring to then. It seemed to be Ngannou's main manager. I just think this is all leading, if he loses, which I think he will, to him leaving the UFC. And as I said, I don't know what will happen next, but yeah, I think it's going to be a very strange year for Francis Ngannou following a year that really was his breakthrough. He finally achieved greatness and became the champ. And now 2022 is going to be a very strange year for Francis Ngannou.
So now Francis Ngannou is definitely going to just tag Cyril Gane like moments into their fight, and both of our predictions are done.
Oh, probably.
Okay, so I'm glad we're on the same track because my hot take involves Francis Ngannou as well. I like that both of you think Cyril Gane beats Francis Ngannou come January 22nd. I think Cyril Gane's just the best heavyweight there is just from his style. But Francis Ngannou, like Nick said, his contract would be up if he's done or would leave because of the messy situation that Dana White and his management happened. But to make Nick's hot take that much hotter, I think Francis Ngannou leaves the UFC, but he goes to WWE. And I have a feeling that WWE makes the offer for him because they've kind of been like name dropping him on some episodes of Raw recently. WWE needs people to like watch their show because they have nothing right now. They're very interested in the MMA, heavyweights coming over. We've seen obviously Brock Lesnar come back. Cain Velasquez had a little stint there. I could see them making a big play for Francis Ngannou to come in there, maybe have a match with Brock or Roman Reigns, something like that, where I could just or Bobby Lashley, someone like that, where I could see WWE just really make a big play. They've cut so much talent; they have the space to afford what Francis Ngannou would want. I could see them doing it And it's maybe the most hottest and out there take, but I could see it happening.
I guess crazier things have happened. Like, now, am I going to predict that? No, but hey, it's a hot take. I respect
it. Exactly. It's a hot
Andre
take.
Arlovsky had a wrestling match last year, so I mean,
Junior Dos Santos
everything's on the board.
Like no one saw that coming. So, and I don't see Ngannou like going to Triller. I would not like to see that, like personally, or doing those boxing things, which feels like that's kind of hit the end of its road for what it was in 2021. By the time now we have events like that. I know that the Triad or whatever it may be, but yeah, that's really what I feel like it could happen, and it would be a big play. But it's it's crazy that sorry, go ahead, Nick.
I just wanted to jump in real quick and ask Eric, like, Jason, you gave your sort of thoughts on if Ngannou does leave, like, but Eric, like, speculate for a second. Like, to me, as I said, there doesn't seem like a natural fit outside of the UFC, because what are you going to do? Bellator fight Ryan Bader for the heavyweight title? No. Are you like, is he just going to win a quick mill in PFL? Probably not, but I guess maybe. Like, is there anything outside the UFC for Francis Ngannou in combat sports, in the real combat sports?
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, heavyweight is not a strong division in the sports, and the majority of the best heavyweights are all in the UFC. I mean, and it's not like Bellator is going to be able to offer him significantly more money or one championship. Come on, PFL only 1 million in a year. That's not doing anything for him either. No. I'm going to go against the grain here, and I'm going to predict he does resign with the UFC this year, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
PFL, I could see like them having to give him a little bit more or something, because you're right. PFL is a promotion that's really going to be the interesting one, because they're not going to be on ESPN anymore. We don't know. We know this Challenger series is on like Fubo TV, which like doesn't really excite a lot of people or make anyone want to come fight for the promotion, but we don't know where their main shows are going to be airing. And if you get a Francis Ngannou, then you open up to, an Amazon or somewhere else where they could be putting on there. But I'm kind of with Nick. I don't see him really going there where he's best heavyweight in the world in the UFC. Why does he need to toil in where the perception is the B leagues?
Yeah. And I suppose he could go to boxing, but the idea he's going to be fighting Deontay Wilder or Anthony Joshua next year is just so unrealistic. Like, we're less than 2 years removed from him flailing against Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Like, he's not going to box Tyson Fury, guys. It's just not going to happen.
Well, that's just how the sport has become, and I
mean, maybe he will. Conor McGregor fought Floyd Mayweather. Like,
well, Conor McGregor also like lived in his own stratosphere. I don't think Ngannou's there yet, but I mean,
he could. Be.
I think the whole he could be. Yes,
he could be.
He could be if someone promotes him. But I think depend. It's just, to me, it's just mind-boggling how the UFC messed up Francis Ngannou. He literally wins the title, and he is the baddest man, like finally, like the Tyson of their heavyweight division. And we're in this contract dispute and trying to kind of push him out the door.
That's probably the story of 2021, if we're being honest.
I think so.
How did they screw up Francis Ngannou? That's the story of 2021.
I mean, that's been par for the course for them at heavyweight too. They had Stipe Miocic, which arguably the greatest heavyweight in their promotion's history, and for years they didn't really promote him at all. I mean, and it was the same deal, contract disputes left and right? So more of the same with Francis Ngannou, unfortunately.
And I guess, lastly here, there's some intrigue going into 2022 with some of these promotions like UFC. Obviously, will they break their records from 2021? Maybe, especially if they do as many shows at the Apex. But like, I think Bellator is going to have a much better year. We've seen that they may run 18 to 20 shows, but how they ended 2021, I thought was the perfect type of card to transition from what we're so used to with Bellator. Like, I don't know. Do you guys have any quick predictions on Bellator and PFL and their growth? I mean, PFL, as I said, is an interesting promotion. But I think Bellator, I think they found the right mix, especially they've got this Bantamweight Grand Prix starting up. They got some good fights to start off the first quarter of 2022. So I don't know. Nick, do you have any thoughts on that?
I would say my only real prediction outside the UFC would be for PFL. I think I thought about it, and I think Kayla Harrison does probably re-sign for them or with them for one more year. I think Amanda Nunes losing to Juliana Pena definitely affected and changed Harrison's plans and the UFC's plans for Harrison, quite frankly. I don't really see the UFC wanting. I mean, of course, they are still interested in Kayla Harrison, but the idea of her being signed to fight at featherweight against Nunes, like that's just not going to happen when Nunes and Pena are going to rematch. That is sitting right there. Like that is an easy fight. And then if Nunes wins, probably you do the trilogy right away, and that's Amanda Nunes' year. I just don't see there being a fit, or at least a good fit, or a worthy fit, worthy enough to sign Kayla Harrison and pay her the big bucks to come over to the UFC. So I think she'll probably re-sign with the PFL, which is huge for PFL. Like that's their biggest star at this point by a mile, and that's going to be very important for their success in 2022.
Do you think Bellator has any hope of getting her, Nick? Because they seem like they want to make a big play. They have the 145 division, which is better than the UFC's, in my opinion. I mean, actually a division there. But I think Kayla would take it over the top, especially just right to a Cyborg fight. But does Bellator have a chance? Because they've whiffed on some free agents in the past.
Yeah, they have. I mean, I do think there's a shot with Chris Cyborg, obviously. Like, I think that is – with Nunes losing, like you could argue, I don't know if this is true, but you could at least argue that Harrison Cyborg is the biggest women's fight you can make, or at least in the eyes of hardcore fans, like that's the most anticipated. That's the biggest in some ways. So I think there's always a shot for Bellator. Like Scott Coker, if he wants Kayla Harrison, just get your money ready, get your checkbook ready, and I think that could happen.
I do too. I personally hope if Kayla doesn't go back to the PFL, because I mean she's got the biggest odds of just being a $3 million fighter, which is like rare in MMA, especially women's. But if she's going to go anywhere else, I think Bellator makes the most sense. I don't know, Eric, your thoughts on what Bellator as a whole can do in 2022 now that we're in this new year? As I think they got some good momentum going into this new year as opposed to last year where they were pretty much ice cold.
I would agree with you. I think this was a really good year for Bellator, considering it felt like year after year of this company just being on the downswing. And I remember going into this last year, I was actually wondering, would Bellator still be a prominent promotion? That's how bad things were looking. But they signed with Showtime, and since then, I feel like they've steadily been putting out mostly good shows. They've been busy with these Grand Prix. And I expect it to be more of the same this upcoming year. I'm not saying they're going to be, promotion of the year and they'll be making headlines left and right, but continuing to steady their course, I would say, in 2022.
Yeah, and I think, as we said before, PFL, very interesting promotion with some of their ideas. Obviously, they're doing this Challengers series, so from February to March with 8 shows, and then a new season with a new bunch of fighters coming on in, and some guys resigning. Getting Ray Cooper to resign with them, I think, is huge as well, because that's their male face of the promotion. Doesn't really give you much in terms of an interview, but he does his action inside the PFL smart cage. My only wish for the PFL, for the love of God, let's not have an 8-hour show, because I swear to God, that is the biggest deficit that they have, is how long their shows are. And especially a championship show, which at least they've caught on. They're going to do their championships 2 nights, because that one night championship with, every fight being 5-minute rounds is just a death sentence to sit through most of the time.
If we were doing a worst of award show instead of a best of award show, PFL would have won every single category for me. I hated their 2021. After, like, at the start of the year, I was excited for the PFL, but sitting through those fucking gargantuan broadcasts, absolutely brutal. I hope they have a much better 2022, but I'm not hopeful at all, because every PFL card last year was worse than the one that came before it. So my expectations are extremely, extremely, extremely low. I hope they exceed them.
Their pacing makes the UFC's pacing look good.
Yeah, exactly. That's insane, right? I never thought I'd be saying that.
Do you remember? Oh, go ahead.
I'd also like to see PFL get rid of, like, you don't need to cover up half the screen with random stats, PFL.
Oh,
you can do away with that as well.
No one cares about the strike speed.
The leg kick speed, or, how fast that takedown was.
At the end of the fights, when they go to the decision and they have like 5 different scores up there, like the verdict MMA score and the fan vote and their own special score and each judge's score, which have nothing to do with the actual judges. It's a complete mess.
And the verdict ones are usually wrong. their
Yes.
formula to calculate how a fight is like scored or whatever is always wrong from what the judges score. So, like, what they need to throw that algorithm in the trash and start over. But yeah, I just hope they learn on the format and pacing, because you remember that show that got bumped on ESPN for like high school football, not even college football, high school football, and they still ran the show like it was normal. And this show finished at like 2 a.m. It was one of the worst and most god awful things to sit through. But they had some good moments, obviously. They had one of the worst decisions this year in that Gleison Tebow Rory McDonald fight.
Yeah, sure.
But you know what? They're interesting to see. And I mean, this is also the year where that WFL can start signing guys.
Yeah, I'm not going to believe that till I see it, but
yeah, I think we're all kind of hesitant about their plans. And you want to talk about pacing? Their start for 2023, they're like 4 shows. I'm like, you'll kill people.
I know
4 shows in one day,
3 shows in a day. Come on, like you're taking the worst of MMA and making it a promotion. This isn't a recipe for success, guys.
Well, even when the UFC did that, it didn't really work out. Like they stopped doing it, like a show in Europe or Asia and then a show in North America. People were out MMA. They had enough MMA for the day.
Once in a blue moon, I didn't mind the 2 shows in a day, or at least like the Friday, Saturday, because it's like, okay, all weekend I'll just watch MMA for this one weekend of the year. Fine. But you don't build a new promotion based off that logic that, oh yeah, we want to watch MMA for 24 hours straight. That's just, again, that's not going to work. But
no. Well, that'll be interesting what they do. They can start signing people now. I don't know. They have big visions. Hopefully it works out for them, but we won't be talking about them until 2023. And I thank you guys for talking to me about the best of MMA in 2021. So before I let you go, Eric, plug your social media. Where can people find your great written content as you sit through every UFC event and have to then transcribe that into text? So you should get an award for that as well, because some of those UFC cards were rough to sit through.
Hey, I don't think anyone watches more MMA than you, so I can take just the UFCs, the Bellators, the PFLs. That's fine. You can check out my work at postwrestling.com. Most of the MMA coverage, the written work at the very least, is mine. I do a number of podcasts for them as well. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, I am Eric Marcotte 705, I think.
Oh, he thinks so.
Yeah.
If you just give him a quick search in your Twitter, you'll find Eric, and Eric's tagged in this, so you can find him there. Nick, where can we find you and your great work that you continue to do?
Yeah, first of all, Jason, thanks for having us back on. This was a lot of fun. Hopefully we can do it at the start of 2023. Your audience can find me on Twitter at Nick Baldwin MMA. You can find all my work over at theScore. Download the app. I'll have I had a lot of year-end stuff, knockout of the year, fight of the year, fight of the year, and so on. And then coming up later this week, I'll have a lot of 2022 preview stuff, fights I want to see, fighters to watch, and so on and so forth. Thanks again for having us, and Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year, guys. I should have said that off the top. Obviously, let's hope 2022 is a great year for each of us, individually, and hopefully the sport has one of its best years and continues the momentum, because as crazy and dumb as the sport can be at sometimes, it's still one of the best sports and things to watch out there. So hopefully everyone has a happy, healthy 2022. Thanks again. And we'll hopefully get you guys back, because we've got to make it a three-peat starting in 2023 with at least the 2 of you. We may get someone else in there, but you and Eric and Nick, you guys have been great to be a part of. So with that, we'll all have a great 2022, and we'll see you all for the year in review of 2022 at the beginning of 2023.